All right, Melissa, I think everybody is in. You're ready to go whenever you are.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first webinar on the Community Center Investment Program. My name is Melissa Latham, and I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at the Community Development Finance Authority, and we're so pleased to have you with us today. We anticipate that this presentation, including time for questions, will run from now until about 11:30. And today we are really focused on providing you an overview of CDFA for those of you who may not be familiar with us or are new to working with us. I will be giving you some information on the Community Center Investment Program. I will be highlighting some project examples. It'll give you a sense of some of the community-driven applicants that we've supported in the past. And then we'll be giving you some next steps to consider as you're developing your project. We are recording today's session and we'll share it along with the presentation slide and links to relevant resources in the coming days. So you can anticipate that hitting your inbox next week. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A box. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation and pause in certain points in the presentation to answer those questions. And now it's my pleasure to hand things off to Katie Easterly-Marte. She's CDFA's Executive Director, and we'll start walking you through who CDFA is.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk with you all about the Community Center Investment Program. As Melissa said, I'm going to start with a brief overview of the Community Development Finance Authority, also known as CDFA. We are a statewide community and economic development entity serving all of New Hampshire. We're state chartered, independent, and we're a nonprofit organization. We're similar to other state authorities, such as New Hampshire Housing or the Business Finance Authority. And our board of directors is appointed by the governor. During this portion of our presentation, our goal is to provide an overview of CDFA, describe our funding and technical assistance ecosystem, and provide some examples of how our work impacts New Hampshire's communities. Our mission is to maximize the value and impact of community development, economic development, and clean energy initiatives throughout the Granite State. In 2022, CDFA made 87 investments in community-based projects. We infused more than $19.8 million into community development, economic development, and clean energy projects throughout New Hampshire. You can see here the significant impacts our partners made for the people of New Hampshire. We provide a variety of financial resources, including the competitive deployment of grants, loans, and tax credit equity. Our staff provide technical assistance to prospective applicants from communities, nonprofits, and for-profit businesses. Our impact is seen in revitalized downtowns, high-quality childcare facilities, renovated housing, clean energy projects, business expansion to provide jobs, and a healthy and vibrant nonprofit sector. CDFA's resources enable our partners to invest across the ecosystem of our project. I'll take this opportunity to describe CDFA's funding ecosystem. It allows a partner to identify a community need, explore ways to meet that need, and ultimately to develop and implement a solution. We are dedicated to supporting our partners in this work and have resources to do so across all stages of the project development ecosystem. As we think about this ecosystem, the first phase of it is concept initiation. This is where we work with our partners to advance new ideas, innovation, and to build the capacity of those partners to build a community development, economic development, or clean energy project. You can see here that there's three different ways that we support concept initiation. That's through our pre-application technical assistance, which I'll speak more of later in the presentation. The grant writing assistance that we provide both in our community development block grant program, as well as the tax credit program, and the community economic development capacity building program, which is a subset of the tax credit program. The tax credits is an allocation of $5 million a year of tax credits. In the planning and development phase of the work, in that green section, this is early access to funds that allow a partner to explore a concept and determine its viability. Determining viability is an important part of any project, and it allows our partner, these resources allow our partners to do things like planning, working with an architect or an engineering firm to do that planning study that identifies whether a site is viable. Doing a marketing study to really determine whether the concept that you're anticipating makes sense in your market. The way that we resource these activities is through the Community Development Block Grant Planning Grants, through pre-development loans, and through the Energy Assessment Grants. The next phase is the most significant of CDFA's resources, and that's to do with implementation of those community development, economic development, and clean energy initiatives. CDFA's core implementation resources include the Community Development Block Grants. This is over $9 million per year for projects that benefit low and moderate individuals and communities. These projects include housing, public facilities, job creation, and micro enterprise support. We also administer a $5 million allocation of state tax credits. This support advances capital projects and the capacity building program I previously mentioned. We also have the Clean Energy and Community Development Loan Funds. The Clean Energy Fund is a $10 million revolving loan pool that provides competitive financing for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects across New Hampshire. The Community Development Fund provides a similar competitive loans for gaps in community development projects. Finally, we support our projects and our partners through engagement activities. That includes building networks that allow different partners who are doing similar activities across the state to connect, share best practices, and learn from each other. Also, asset management. We know that once you build this incredible community facility, that you really need support in ensuring that that facility can be operated in the long run, and we provide support for that activity. We also have a significant body of data, which we'll provide some information about later in the presentation, that we hope supports our partners in really understanding how their community, how the demographics in their community compare to statewide and regional demographics, and really understanding both what those needs are in your community as well as the opportunities. And finally, we provide technical assistance across all of our programs to ensure that you have access to the applications, that you are successful in completing that application, and then you can carry out that project for your community. In addition, CDFA is also deploying resources that we consider special allocations. These are one-time or pilot funds that provide the opportunity for strategic investments in New Hampshire communities. Here are the current special allocations we are administering. The Community Center Investment Program will provide resources to nonprofits and municipalities to support infrastructure improvements to community spaces across the Granite State. This investment of $20 million in federal American Rescue Plan Act funds, which are administered by the Governor's Office of Emergency Relief and Recovery, will allow CDFA to deploy significant resources into our communities. We will review this program in detail in today's webinar. We also are administering the Recovery Housing Pilot Program. This is a pilot program deploying federal resources which are similar but a little distinct to the Community Development Block Grants in New Hampshire. And we're providing, these funds are looking to provide stable temporary housing to individuals in recovery from substance use disorder. There are approximately $2 million in grant funds available, and applications for this opportunity are being accepted on a rolling basis until funds are expended. Also, the Community Navigator Program. It's designed to reduce barriers to accessing critical resources for small businesses, so that this really builds on our micro enterprise technical assistance program that is funded through the Community Development Block Grant. And it's focused on providing that support to women, socially and economically disadvantaged and underserved entrepreneurs across the Granite State. Additionally, we'll soon have information on new resources to support solar projects that are focused on serving low and moderate income residents. I know that that was a lot of information about our CDFA's funding ecosystem. And if you'd like to learn more about our ecosystem, maybe you're new to the CDFA resources, I'd suggest that you consider looking at the workshop that we provide. It's a workshop on our resources. It really goes into that detail that I just gave you a really brief overview of in terms of every program. There was a webinar provided at the end of January, and on our YouTube channel, which you'll see in the chat in just a minute, you can find this webinar as well as webinars for all of the programs that I've just discussed. In addition, CDFA's Resource Hub, which we'll also provide a link in the chat too, provides increased access to program-related information and resources for our partners. So it's an easy to navigate online platform. It provides both written information and also links to those YouTube videos and other resources so that you can understand all of these programs in terms of the program objectives, the eligibility, when the applications are due. And this also provides you a link to talking with staff members to really ensure that what you're thinking in terms of CDFA resources really will support the project you have in mind in your community. The end result of CDFA's investment in the project ecosystem is strong, vibrant communities. We make investments that create and strengthen a community's sense of place. We do this through an integrated, holistic, community and economic development approach. A great example is the city of Laconia. Over the past decade, CDFA has worked with partners to make significant investments to help this community meet basic human needs, build local capacity and resiliency, and increase economic success. A sample of our investments in Laconia include the facility improvements to the Boys and Girls Club of Central New Hampshire that allowed them to expand services, including specific services that were available during the COVID-19 crisis. Assisting the Lakes Region Mental Health Center to consolidate its facilities into one centralized location to help improve access to mental health services and meet the growing demand. That's the bottom right-hand corner photo. And renovating cornerstone downtown arts and culture venues within the community, including the Colonial Theater and the Belknap Mill. In addition, providing technical assistance grants and capacity support to the Belknap Economic Development Corporation to boost their ability to support small and local businesses. These investments support critical human and safety net services, provide new opportunities for area residents, and a healthy and vibrant community. I'm going to pause here and see if we have any questions on CDFA and the programs that we've just provided an overview of.
Katie, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A box at this time. And just a reminder to participants that you can place questions in that Q&A box at any time during the presentation, as we will be pausing throughout. And while I was mentioning that, we did just get one question about if there's a list of past grants awarded across all programs.
Yeah, so in that resource hub, as well as CDFA's main website, there is a list of previous grantees for each of our programs. So there's two places that you could really see that. In each of those ecosystem phases, we actually have examples of projects, and you can find that under our impact on CDFA's main website. And then actually in our annual report, which is created for September 1st of every year, we do a full list of every single grant that's been made in that year. And those are actually available for all the subsequent years. So you can see all of the grant making that we've done.
Great. So we have a question about what grant did Laconia use for the Boys and Girls Club?
Thank you. Yeah, so that was a It was actually 2 grants that we've supported the Boys and Girls Club with there in Laconia. So one was the Community Development Block Grant. So the block grants are actually a grant to the municipality. So in this case, the city of Laconia, and then they're sub-granted to the Boys and Girls Club because they're providing primary services for households of low and moderate income, which is a requirement of that block grant program. Secondly, we actually provided the tax credit, an allocation of tax credits directly to the Boys and Girls Club, because the eligibility for the tax credit program is municipalities and nonprofits. So as a nonprofit, they were awarded an allocation of tax credits and found business donors to support their project who received a tax credit in exchange for their donation. And that supported the Boys and Girls Club project as well.
And the second part of that question is, would the new community center grant be suitable? And I think we'll probably address that a little bit more later in the presentation. Great. So another question, do you need to apply for pre-application assistance, and who would be the best person to contact about that?
Great. So we will also cover that later in the presentation in terms of how to access that pre-application technical assistance by our staff. So I'll hold on both those questions just so we can jump into the community center portion of this presentation. And we hope that that gives you a thorough understanding of the requirements of this program as well as the next steps. But we'll have other opportunities to answer questions and definitely jump back to these just to be sure that we have. Any other questions that are maybe specific to this section, Melissa? And then we'll just jump in to give people that other information.
There was a question that I think both applies to community centers, but also more broadly to our resources, is whether we favor projects in communities that are perceived as failing, or to put it another way, would my project be less favored because you perceive my overall community as being successful? So I think that that is a different answer for each of our resources, but I'll let you touch on that, Katie.
Great. So yeah, as Melissa indicated, some of our resources do have a requirement to meet low and moderate income households or to be located in communities that are made up of majority low and moderate income households. The community center program, you'll see, does not have that requirement, and we'll jump into those details right now. So CDFA's Community Center Investment Program will provide resources to nonprofits and municipalities to support infrastructure improvements to community spaces across New Hampshire. This investment of $20 million in Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds is administered in coordination with the Governor's Office of Emergency Relief and Recovery, and it will deploy significant resources in our community. These funds were approved for this purpose by the Governor and Council in late December. This program is an opportunity to make deeper impacts within New Hampshire's community through this one-time strategic investment in community-based infrastructure. Community centers are incredibly important for the health and vibrancy of New Hampshire's communities. They provide opportunities for residents to be active, to receive essential services, and to engage with fellow residents. Community centers are inclusive, open to the public, and foster a culture of health and wellness in the communities they serve. We are focusing the Community Center Investment Program resources on supporting facilities managed by municipalities and nonprofits with limited resources and a demonstrated need to invest in their physical infrastructure. We want these community centers, as you do, to be viable for decades to come. Awards will be made to advance community projects that show a high degree of community support, which build partnerships and leverage other resources. This is a competitive program that awards funds to rehabilitate existing community centers or existing facilities that can become community centers, to expand or build community centers, and we'll get into more detail on eligible activities soon. As discussed earlier in the presentation, CDFA will also provide technical assistance to prospective applicants and awardees to help facilitate successful applications and project completion. I want to go through a couple of definitions that we think will be critical for you to understand, to then identify whether the project you have in mind really meets this community center investment program. So a community center is a facility that currently exists or is planned to be developed. It is owned and operated by a municipality or a nonprofit organization, or a partnership between a municipality and a nonprofit organization. The community center is an open, accessible space that provides services that meet the multifaceted needs of the community or a target population. The services of the facility could include community recreation, community improvement, community gathering and building, and/or social services. So when we speak about a community center providing social services, it's the delivery of services provided at the community center, and it may include, but it's not limited to this list, programming and/or services for senior citizens, programming and/or services for children under 18, food delivery and nutrition support, services for people with a disability, health services, mental health services or substance use disorder services, and services that meet the needs of an under or unhoused person. It also includes family resource centers and the services they provide. Continue with these definitions because you saw these definitions in the program overview, and I want to be sure that we provide information on how we're defining these terms so that you can, again, see your project in these areas. So target populations, we said that the community center could serve the broad community or a target population. When we think about target population, we based the analysis on the analysis of impediments to fair housing. CDFA supports target populations, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ, disabled, women and gender nonconforming individuals, rural, youth, low and moderate income persons, and households or unhoused residents. So while it's not a requirement of the program, you can have a community center that focuses its services on these target populations. Also, while not a requirement of the program, and this was previously asked as it relates to the community development block grant, which it is a requirement, this program does not require that this community center is in a target area, but ensuring that target areas, places where there is a high need and has significant social economic challenges, is a part of the qualifications of these funds from the federal perspective, and is something that will be considered in our review of these applications. So target areas are places with a high need, and CDFA actually collects information on all places across New Hampshire, and we make that available to all people so that you can better understand this information. I'll provide additional information about the data that CDFA uses and makes available to our partners later in the presentation. I want to talk about the program objectives in a little more detail. We provided a program overview, and now these are the additional objectives of the program. So applications for the following activities will be prioritized. Projects that serve target population, show the greatest need, and are likely to have a significant impact on the community. Projects that reinvest in public physical infrastructure and revitalize target areas. Projects that encourage the development of effective and durable collaborations and partnerships amongst multiple organizations that impact communities and strengthen that community. If an application meets multiple of these needs and these priorities, it will rank higher. Additional priorities include projects that advance significant energy efficiency and renewable elements, and projects that are ready and proposed by applicants that have the capacity to be successful. I'll pause now for questions.
Great, Katie. We do have a number of questions that I'm just going to ask folks if you could please try and use the Q&A box for those questions. It helps us make sure that we don't miss any, as I know the chat can get a little bit busy during the presentation. So one question related to some of the populations that we're looking for these centers to serve. You mentioned youth. What about seniors?
Yes, absolutely. So in the definition of community center, we'll just return to that slide. We did identify that a community center is a facility that's owned or operated by a nonprofit or a municipality. It's opened and accessible, and it either meets the broad, multifaceted need of the community or a target population, and it can provide services. And then in the social service definition, you'll see that, yep, senior citizens are directly identified in that definition. Thank you for that question.
Great. Another question is whether this funding is open to organizations located in cities that manage their own CDBG processes.
Yes, absolutely. So this program is open and accessible. It doesn't have the income requirements of the block grant program, and it also is not limited in terms of which municipalities are eligible. So all municipalities across New Hampshire are eligible to receive an allocation of these funds.
Great. Can these resources be used for feasibility studies on a building to make sure this is a viable project?
What a great question. And that's something that we absolutely want our project partners to be doing and thinking about. These particular resources are in that implementation phase of the ecosystem, so cannot support that what we would call planning and development phase of work, but we have other resources that absolutely align with that need, and we'd encourage you to reach out to CDFA and to consider applying for those other resources to support that activity. That really helps in the readiness of a project for these implementation funds.
So we do have a question about where a definition of rural or urban could be found for New Hampshire municipalities. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, so that is something that we'll actually provide in our written guidance. So in addition to these definitions, we're going to provide additional definitions in that written guidance. So you can expect that to be sent your way in the coming weeks.
Great. One question that might be is pretty specific, but can a community facility charge fees for access or services or require membership?
Great. So that we do, again, want to ensure that these projects are open and accessible. That doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be fees associated with it. So that specific definition will again be provided in the written guidance that's accessible to all of you and publicly available in the coming weeks.
Great. Does the municipality or nonprofit have to own the building?
Good question. I think that that's something that we would also provide additional information about in the coming weeks in written guidance, because what I'm thinking about is the implementation requirements, which you'll want to understand and be sure can be met. So again, that will be in the written guidance, and we'll have an upcoming webinar which will really dig into those requirements and ensure that you understand them and can be successful at completing an application, even if it doesn't, if it has that kind of nuance of ownership.
Great, and I'm just looking through the Q&A box at this time, and it seems like some of these questions will actually answer a little bit further down the line with some of the information that we'll be providing. So I think we'll continue on with the presentation, Katie, and continue to pause to answer some of these questions if they're not addressed in the content.
Great. Thank you so much for your questions. It really helps to ensure that people are understanding the ways that others are thinking about applying these funds to their projects, and ensures that we provide that really specific program guidance so that you're able to complete successful applications. So moving into the available resources. So the maximum grant award in this program is $1 million. There is a 15% match requirement with the award, and the minimum amount that an applicant can apply for is $100,000. In terms of the match requirement, an example of meeting this match requirement is if you had a $900,000 rehabilitation project. The applicant would need to have $135,000 in committed funds and could apply to the Community Center Investment Program for the balance, or $365,000, in order to complete that project. The proposed matching funds and all resources to complete the project need to be secured and readily available at the time of application. All reimbursement costs must be allowable under the American Rescue Plan Act State Fiscal Recovery Funds Award and applicable guidance, and will cover general information on eligible expenses in a few slides, but we'll provide that more specific implementation and allowable expenditure guidance at our application webinar, which will be on March 23rd, and we hope you all join us for that next webinar. Eligible applicants include public and private nonprofit organizations and municipalities. The eligibility definitions for this program are: a nonprofit must be up to date with their annual reports with the New Hampshire Secretary of State. Qualifying nonprofits are those regulated by the Charitable Trust Division of the New Hampshire Department of Justice. They're governed by volunteer boards. They have significant fiduciary obligations and are supported by experienced professionals. In the written guidance, you'll see this definition and these requirements and better understand how to meet those requirements. A municipality is any city, incorporated town, or village or county in New Hampshire. The Community Center Investment Program is funded, again, by the American Rescue Plan Act State Fiscal Relief Funds. Eligible uses of these funds are defined by federal guidance. Federal guidance allows for the granting of funds through competitive rounds that create community centers which directly contribute to strong, healthy communities by building or renovating neighborhood facilities that promote health and safety. These funds are available as part of the COVID-19 public health and economic response. Part of this response is making sure that community development and neighborhood revitalization activities are supported and that they improve communities across the state. With this guidance in mind, the Community Center Investment Program awards will be to projects focused on the following activities: to develop a new center. All applicants proposing a new facility must complete a new facility analysis with the application, and additional details on how to complete this analysis will be available during the application workshop. Rehabilitating the physical or outdoor programming space of the center, expanding an existing center, improving heating, cooling, air quality, and/or ventilation, improving the energy efficiency of the building or space, and are improving the health, safety, and comfort of the center. Projects that meet these eligibility requirements and submit an application will be reviewed by a professional staff. Those applications will then be brought with recommendations to the Community Development Advisory Committee. The Community Development Advisory Committee is a public body which is nominated and approved by the Governor and Council. All projects that are recommended for funding will ensure that they demonstrate a public purpose and are for a public benefit. They'll also demonstrate that they have a need for these funds. The applicant will also demonstrate through their application that they have the capacity and the readiness to be able to successfully carry out a project. In the application, you'll also show that you comply with local, state, federal laws and guidance, and that you meet the requirements of CDFA's energy policy. The next steps for this program, this is the workshop, as you can see. This is the program workshop. We'll then continue to provide technical assistance, written guidance to ensure that you understand the parameters of this program and how to fit your important community project into this program, whether it's a good fit and whether you should continue to consider an application. We'll then provide an application workshop on March 23rd, and we hope you register for that upcoming workshop. And then the first round of applications will be due on April 21st. Again, we'll have a professional staff of CDFA that will review those applications and evaluate them against the criteria that I previously presented. And we'll bring recommendations to the Community Development Advisory Committee in May. We expect to have decisions to our applicants at that time so that you can start construction within six months. We really expect as you're applying that you're ready to start construction, and we want to move with that timeline as well. I'm going to go a little bit more into the evaluation now. I spoke about that a little bit, but just to be sure that you understand the evaluation criteria. Program applicants are subject to a substantial program and financial review. A project is considered on its own merits and as it compares to other applicants in the same funding round. So I talked a little bit about the review process, but the review process will begin with a CDFA internal team, and that team will determine whether the applicant meets the threshold requirements. We'll go through these threshold requirements briefly today, but we'll provide much more information on these requirements in the upcoming application workshop. So we want to ensure that all applicants meet the application criteria so that you've completed an application and you've included all the information that's required. That you have a secured match funds, that you comply with CDFA's energy policy, and that you're ready for implementation. Those are the requirements, the threshold requirements. Let me go into those in a little more detail now. As I said previously, this program requires a 15% match. And you'll need to secure the matching funds as well as any funds that you need to successfully complete your project above and beyond what you'll be applying to this program for at the time of application. As we mentioned earlier in this section, all applicants require an energy charrette or an energy audit in compliance with CDFA's energy policy. This is not something, if this is not something that you already have underway or considered, CDFA has resources to help you meet the requirements of our energy policy. We have an energy and community facility assessment grant, which I'll speak to a little more in the coming slides. If you're interested in accessing these resources, please consider reaching out to us as a next step, and we'll help guide you through this process. I'm going to speak a little bit now about CDFA's resources to support energy efficiency. We think of energy efficiency upgrades as an important piece of ensuring that projects are sustainable and that they're able to be operated in your community for the years to come. We provide several resources for applicants seeking to improve their facilities' energy efficiency or add renewable energy. We have grants for energy-related assessment and low-interest financing to be that could be used as match funding for your project and help you to meet the other needs in your project that this grant program cannot meet. CDFA technical assistance will help you to really figure out how to use this grant assessment and then the other resources we have available to put together a comprehensive project. I'd like to highlight our Community Facility Energy Assessment Program grant. You saw this in our funding ecosystem in that assessment section. This is available to eligible municipalities and nonprofit organizations. You can apply for 75% of the cost of an energy-related study. This is a very easy application with an approval in less than a week. Over the past year, we provided a dozen grants to support a variety of community facility energy studies. So if you have an existing building and you're looking to use the Community Center Investment Program to upgrade that building, a community facility energy assessment is a great place to start because, again, it covers 75% of the cost of this evaluation and will provide you that good information to develop the architectural and engineering plans to make those upgrades to your facility. I'm going to now talk about the priorities. So those were the thresholds. So as we evaluate projects, they have to meet those thresholds that we went through. And then there are some additional priorities. So a project does not have to meet all of these priorities, but these will be evaluated. If you are successful at meeting the thresholds, then we'll review your application against these priorities. Your project team should be thinking about the following and how you can demonstrate a clear public benefit and public purpose. So as you're thinking about your community center project, how valuable or meaningful is the project to the community it serves, either the community at large or the target population? What's the degree of public accessibility to the project? How can you talk about that public accessibility in your application? What is the project's economic benefits to the community or to the state? In order to help you to really think about these questions, we provide data, and I'll provide an overview of that data resource that CDFA provides in the upcoming slides. Secondly, we'd like to understand the community input and support for your project. How have you engaged the local community in planning your project? Have you held community planning sessions? Have you provided an opportunity for public engagement in a public forum? What has been your process for bringing together community members to design this project, give you ideas of what the priorities of your community center have been? What partners have participated in the planning process, or how will you engage them once the project's complete? So again, in the next workshop, as we go through the application, you'll see that you'll have an opportunity to actually summarize your response to these questions in the application. So we want to provide you an opportunity to really think about that public benefit. Public benefit is really based on what are the needs in your community and how does the project that you're proposing really meet those needs? We know that you are experts in your community, and we want to provide you data that really adds to your expertise and your knowledge of your community. So we have a community progress indicators, and these indicators are available for all 234 municipalities across the state. Since 2019, we've worked with New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute to identify data and information that helps to quantify social, economic, and community strengths, issues, and challenges. The result of that work with the Fiscal Policy Institute and a broad set of partners is that we collect community progress indicators in 3 categories. You'll see here that those categories are basic human needs, access to opportunity, and community stability and vibrancy. The first indicators were released in January 2020, using data from 2019. In the summer and fall, we work with the Fiscal Policy Institute staff to update the indicators with new data from the current year. We post updated community progress indicators on our website in December of each year. The complete set for 2023 is now posted on our website. You can use this data as you pull together your case statement for your project. Data for all 13 indicators are compiled for each New Hampshire municipality and for each of the 10 counties across New Hampshire. You can access this data in a bunch of different ways. You can download an Excel spreadsheet that looks like this. This is an excerpt from the 2023 indicators, showing data from different communities. Municipalities are listed in the far left column. So as you read across the table, you can see the indicator value for each community, starting with population. You can use this data to inform your community decision-making and investments. You can also use it to compare your community to other communities nearby. We'll take a look at one community. Here we've highlighted the city of Laconia again, just to bring back to that example earlier. You can read across from left to right. You can see that the city of Laconia is the most populous municipality in Belknap County and has the highest rates of enrollment in SNAP, also known as food stamps, and free and reduced price school meals programs. Across Belknap County, families spend 18% more than the benchmark of 30% of household income on housing costs. For this indicator, if a family spent 30% of its housing, the indicator would show 100%. The median age is lower than most surrounding towns, which suggest more children live in Laconia. So say you were developing an application for funding a community center in Laconia. Information about the population and the makeup of that population is something that you know, and you could also then use to really underscore the need for this project in your application. So there's a couple of different ways, again, that you can use this. You can see a snapshot of your town or city, and you can use this to talk to other community members about the need for the project that you're proposing. And then you can use this information to build that case of support for your project in your application. Late in 2021, CDFA created a new web page. So if using the Excel spreadsheet is not what you think would be most compelling to the community group you may want to talk to about your community center proposed project, you can actually look on CDFA's website and you can see a map. It's created by policy map, and all the data I previously shared in the previous slides can be viewed on this map. If you shift to the next slide, please. Great. This map can actually, so again, you can visualize the data in that spreadsheet on this map. You can learn more about the community progress indicators, and a link to the current Excel spreadsheet that I showed you earlier is accessible on CDFA's Resource Hub. One of CDFA's regional partners, the Hannah Grimes Center in Keene, worked with the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute to actually develop another set of indicators, which are the business and economic indicators. You can download those economic indicators on this data website as well. Policy Map is a really powerful tool in really understanding the needs in your community. So in addition to on our website, looking at those 13 indicators that CDFA has pulled for each municipality, you can go to Policy Map, www.policymap.com, and exploring other data that Policy Map has available. If your project, for instance, is focused on food, on quality of life, education, some data sets are available on Policy Map that may be able to help you explain your project, build that community support, and then build an application that really speaks to the needs across your community. I'll pause now for questions.
Hi, Katie. We have a number of questions, some of which might be clarifying some of the information that you've already presented. And so I just want to start there. So somebody's asking for some more specifics on readiness and defining readiness for this program.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we would, there are expenditure requirements of this program. So we want to be sure that all applicants can be successful at carrying out their project and meeting those requirements. So a couple of important readiness things to think about are that you do have to have the funding that supports your project available when you apply for these community center investment program grant dollars. So that's an important readiness criteria. We'd also expect that your project can start construction within 6 months. So while you don't have to be with your shovel about to start construction tomorrow, we do expect that you are that you have good cost estimates, that you have thought through and secured the other sources of funding, and you're applying for these funds to really be able to start that construction project within 6 months.
Great. And we have a couple of questions about different scenarios for projects as well. Can the community facility be a mixed use? Like, for example, a community center, a food pantry, recreation center, and municipal offices?
So those are really interesting projects as we think about that kind of multifaceted pieces of the needs of a community. So it's likely the definition of community center that the funds would need to be focused on those areas of what you described in mixed use that align to the community center. But having a multifaceted building is absolutely in alignment with the objectives of this program. So we could see that you would use these funds directly for the improvement of those pieces of the building that are used as a community center. So if I heard the list correct, that would be food pantry, and the other
recreation.
Yeah, so you'd go, I would really take that example, that definition of community center, and just consider that against the building that you're thinking of. In this case, it sounds like renovating. And then you'd be applying those community center investment funds to those portions that are the community center portion of the building. And that would absolutely be an applicable project for this program.
Great. Along similar lines, just kind of testing, can we revitalize an existing community center that may be about 20 years old and install something like a commercial kitchen or upgrade the lighting to LED?
Yes, absolutely. So these federal funds actually prioritize the renovation of existing buildings or existing community centers. They also allow for the building of new facilities. There is that additional requirement of doing an analysis to show that that's necessary in your community, and we'll provide additional information about how to complete that analysis in the application workshop. But the federal funds actually prioritize the revitalization of existing buildings or facilities. So what you've described absolutely aligns with the program objectives.
Great. A couple of questions around the match. Does it have to be non-federal? Like, are there any requirements as to what counts as match, and would owning the land that the building will be on count towards the match?
We'll provide additional written guidance about the match, but at this point, there's not specific requirements for that match. So we'll look to be as flexible as possible and provide you additional written guidance. We also don't want the match to deter a really important and aligned projects. So we'll provide that additional guidance about how to meet that requirement in the written guidance that we'll provide after this workshop.
Sorry, I'm just trying to sift through some of the questions, understanding that some of these are going to be more relevant in the application workshop. Let's see. What considerations or flexibility is in place to allow for extensions on the 6-month build requirement?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to balance, obviously, meeting the extensive needs across New Hampshire for investing in public facilities and the implementation and spend requirements of this program. One of the important things to CDFA about the administration of this program is it really builds upon all the work that CDFA has done over the last 35 years and will continue to do into the future. So we'd hope to engage with anyone at any stage of their project readiness, because if this program doesn't align with your project timeline, if you're not able to be ready in the timeline of this program, we're hopeful that we'll have other resources, including particularly our tax credit resources, that could help you with your project. So we'd really encourage you to engage with this information and the upcoming webinar. We'll talk about next steps in the next section to do that important planning and development and community building work to ensure there's support for your project. But if that work really doesn't align with this timeline, we're confident that this is work that we're committed to for years to come, and that we'll be able to continue to work with you through other implementation programs.
Great. One question about whether nonprofit organizations can apply directly or if a municipality needs to apply on their behalf.
Thank you so much. Yeah, a nonprofit can directly apply for these funds.
Maybe just another question about how uses, can it be used for safety and security of a community center? We have many youth programs in our facility, but are lacking, for example, locking doors in case of an emergency.
Yes, absolutely. So safety and wellness of existing facilities are absolutely an aligned priority to this program. Also, we've heard of communities when we were first working on this program that are interested in actually renovating existing facilities so they can better meet the emergency preparedness goals of their community. So you might have an existing community center, and it would be a good place to align with your emergency preparedness plans and your facility needs, but it doesn't yet meet those needs. This would be a great grant program to make those improvements to existing facilities as well.
Great. One question, there are several library directors on this call, and we certainly see our libraries as community centers. Will that be considered, will libraries be considered community centers for the purposes of this program?
So we certainly have heard that libraries serve as important community centers in many communities across New Hampshire. And so we've been working with partners, including library directors themselves and the Library Association, to provide that additional guidance to ensure that we're hearing from you on how to define library use as community center, and we'll provide that written guidance. So I expect that a library would be eligible, and we'll provide some additional guidance for how to determine eligibility of what you're proposing.
One question about whether funds can be used to provide grant-based job positions at an existing community center.
So they cannot. These funds are for the infrastructure. So they're really for the building. Both, as we talked about, updating updating the lighting so it's LED, making the facility safe and meeting the needs of the community, but they won't be able to pay for staff positions to support that facility.
Here's an interesting one, is whether improvements across multiple sites could count as one project for an application.
That is interesting. We always look to try to provide flexibility in our grant programs to the needs we're hearing in communities, and haven't heard yet about that idea. So we'll definitely take that consideration as we finalize additional guidance. And just a bit about process. So as Melissa spoke to earlier in the webinar, we will be providing additional written guidance. We'll then provide additional information about applying to the Community Center program on the March 23rd application workshop. But in addition to that, we'll have a frequently asked questions document in which we really respond to questions that we hadn't thought of or hadn't yet got guidance in order to think of, but are coming in. So that type of question will really help us to establish additional information to respond to your questions. And we'll just need to compare that to the requirements of these funds and then provide that written guidance. So if we can't answer it today, we're hopeful that we will be able to over the coming weeks in either the program guidance or the subsequent FAQs, which we'll build on over time and then ensure that are publicly available. So I don't have an answer for multi-sites today, but it sounds like a really interesting approach, and we'll definitely provide guidance to that in the coming weeks.
Katie, a couple just more questions about matching funds being secured or available.
Yep.
So if a town meeting is May 11th and the vote for approval will be held that night, does that disqualify an applicant from coming in?
So again, additional information will be available in the written guidance, but I'll just speak to how we've previously handled that. And I think it would likely be the same in this program. And we're just, again, finalizing to ensure that that meets all the funding requirements. But if there is a specific decision on funding and it's forthcoming, and we'll provide that specific timeline in which that decision needs to be made, that would not disqualify an applicant. So you could provide evidence of that forthcoming decision, and then the funds would be contingent on that decision.
Katie, could you speak to site control of a property at time of application and the importance of that for readiness?
Absolutely. So it's not a requirement, but as the questionnaire, as the person asking the question is definitely implying, it's an important piece of showing readiness. So we have in the past awarded funds to projects that are able to show that they have site control once the funding is available. So they may not have the funds to acquire the property, but they definitely have a secured interest in the property, and with a funding award can quickly move to site control and then to complete the project within the time frame of the program.
We have a question about pre-application support, and Katie, I believe the timeline for that is a little bit further down the line as far as pre-application support specific for this program, but we're always happy to chat with you if you're looking to access some of CDFA's other resources. But for specific community center pre-application meetings, we'll have instructions on how to secure those meetings with CDFA staff at a later point. And I just also want to note that there's a question here about the $25,000 for planning grants for a block grant, Katie. And what if their planning needs are well over that $25,000 grants? Would they be able to access other funds to move that process along?
Absolutely. So we've seen applicants use the $25,000 of planning dollars, which are a grant, and then to actually, if they can identify that their project is feasible and likely to be successful at securing implementation dollars, then that project sponsor will come in for a pre-development loan. And then the activities that you undertake with that pre-development loan can actually be the loan can be repaid with the implementation dollars. So in this case, I'm just going to draw an example, but you would apply for the planning grant dollars. If you received approval for the planning grant dollars, you would go through your first stages of pre-development activities and determine feasibility of the project. Say you've identified a site and you're excited that that site meets your needs and you're continuing to advance a viable project there. You would then apply for pre-development resources and use that to advance the architectural and engineering needs of the project. At the same time as you're applying for the implementation resources through the community center program. And then you'd have in your sources and uses, in the uses section of your application, you'd show that you're actually covering the cost of that architectural with the implementation dollars, making it you able to pay back that pre-development loan and therefore continue in the successful implementation of your project. So we'd usually, at least at CDFA, we don't have additional grant resources to support that pre-development activity, but we do have that loan resource. And we've had applicants seek other resources outside of CDFA to carry out those activities as well.
Great. I think hopefully we've addressed most, if not all, the questions. And some of these, as I mentioned, we will be having more information on them at the application workshop. So we will be providing those further details at that workshop, as well as in some of the program guidance. So thank you for continuing to submit your questions. And at this point, Katie, I think we should probably move more into the presentation and see what other questions come up between now and the end.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions, and Melissa for your coordination. We'll now walk through a few project examples of how CDFA has engaged with projects that advance important community facility needs in communities. The first is Second Start. It's a private nonprofit educational corporation in Concord. It offers a variety of programs designed to improve the economic and educational well-being of New Hampshire residents. The programs include a child care center, adult basic education, job training and career counseling, education and training for at-risk youth, and family strengthening activities. Second Start utilized clean energy funds and the Community Development Block Grant Program. CDFA helped Second Start install a solar PV system, which significantly reduced their energy costs. It was a 77 kilowatt system, and it produces over 100,000 kilowatts per year of energy, saving Second Start over $14,000 per year in electric costs. CDFA's total investment in Second Start is $343,000, including the $43,000 Clean Energy Fund loan and $300,000 of Community Development Block Grant dollars, which upgraded the windows and made other important upgrades in this facility. Next is the Boys and Girls Club of Central New Hampshire. They actually currently have a project underway to rebuild the former Pennacook Community Center into an 8,000 square foot licensed childcare and youth development center. According to Child Care Aware of America, there is a 600 slot shortage of childcare spaces in the Concord area. The project will help meet the area's urgent need for childcare for low and moderate income families by adding 91 childcare slots. At least this was funded, as you can see, under the resources with the community development block grants. So at least 51% of these positions will be, of these slots, childcare slots, will be reserved for low and moderate income households, although the number will likely be much higher. The existing Pennacook Community Center building and 2 homes that are on the property will actually be demolished to make room for the new center. The new facility will maximize energy efficiency and sustainability, including the use of carbon forms, air filtration, non-toxic materials, and the installation of a roof-mounted solar panels. The Boys and Girls Club is also working with the City of Concord to relocate the Pennacook Library branch to this property. The estimated cost of the new facility is about $5 million. And in addition to the CDBG CV funding in the amount of $750,000, other funding resources include funds from the Boys and Girls Club, a capital campaign, a bank loan, and CDFA tax credits in the amount of $360,000. Those are just 2 examples of community facility projects that CDFA supported. In the application workshop, we'll have additional examples of how you can successfully complete the application, and you can see your project in these examples as well. Before we jump into the next steps, we want to review a few tools and resources available to you throughout the process. We work closely with potential applicants during the pre-application phase to understand your needs, align those needs to technical assistance and financial resources, understand other potential projects, the sources of support that can be brought to your project, and help strengthen the project's capacity for success. As Melissa talked about, we provide ongoing technical assistance. At this point, technical assistance can be found on our resource hub, and there's a CDFA resource hub link there where you'll find access to many technical resources, including written guidance about all of our programs, those supports that are available to you during the concept initiation phase, if that's where your readiness is right now, or in the planning and development phase, if that's something you're working on. And then later in this community center investment program process, we will have specific pre-application technical assistance meeting times available, and we will provide you information about how to access those pre-application technical assistance meetings. We hope that you'll look at the resource hub to really gain additional information about the program, and that you may also look back at previous webinars to understand additional information about those funds that could support your current needs. We hope you're interested in pursuing an application to the Community Center Investment Program. Sign up for our March 23rd webinar will allow you to learn additional details on the program, including an overview of the application process, more details on the threshold requirements and evaluation criteria, and implementation information. If you're seriously considering an application for this round of funding, you can register for our grants management system. All applications must be completed using CDFA's grants management system. All individuals working on an application within our system must register. You can access the grants management system from our website. We also have instructions on our resource hub on how to register for and navigate the system. CDFA will be notified once you register, and we typically review and approve those registrations within 2 or 3 business days. You will then receive an email from GMS with your user ID and password. You can change your password after you log in under the My Profile on the main menu page. We'll go into more information around the grants management system in the application workshop. So just to be sure that you have the key dates available. So on March 23rd, as we've talked about, we'll have the Community Center Program Application Workshop. On March 24th, applications will be available on CDFA's grants management system so that you can begin that application. And the application will be due on April 21st at 4 o'clock. In the last week in April and the beginning of May, we'll evaluate the applications against those threshold criteria and then the evaluation criteria. And during the week of May 29th, we'll make those first round notifications. We'd be happy to stay on and answer any additional questions that you have and collect your thoughts and feedback so that we, again, can take them into consideration as we continue to develop the guidance and those frequently asked questions answers so that you can successfully complete an application.
Great, Katie. A question about whether schools can access this infrastructure fund to help with building expansion.
So schools, for the purpose of schools, would not be eligible. It would have to be for a specific community center project that met the community center definition.
We have questions about when funds need to be expended by and whether there'll be another opportunity to access these resources.
So the funds need to be expended by the end of by 2024, and we'll provide additional information on implementation in the next webinar, so you can understand sort of how to facilitate a successful application and then to meet that expenditure deadline. And we'll provide additional information about other opportunities. We'd really encourage those potential applicants to really understand and use the resources available to build your readiness. And if there is an additional round of applications, that would be an opportunity to find those implementation resources, or again, CDFA has other implementation resources to support your project.
Great, and a question about whether they should wait until the application seminar to start an application, and the answer to that is yes. We will provide more details then, and our application in our grants management system will be live the following day after that webinar. So if you are seriously looking to pursue an application, then we recommend you can sign up for our grants management system, but you in no way need to do that in advance of the application workshop in March. You can register for our grants management system at any time, including following that application workshop. So if you need to wait and find out some more information about whether your project might be a good fit and if this is funding that you'd like to pursue, don't feel pressure to register for GMS. You will have an opportunity to do that after that other application workshop as well. And some of these questions are pretty project specific, so I think they'd be best addressed in some pre-application meetings at another time. But we do have a question here that says, it seems like we would need a fully developed project with architect and engineering work done and bids sent out already to bidders before we even complete the application in order to be viable. So that's less of a question, more of a statement, but would love your thoughts on that, Katie.
Yeah, so I think I'm building from the way that we think about readiness in the community development block grant program, which has a similar expectation for readiness and completion. So we really want to ensure that potential applicants are not excluded from this opportunity because they don't have the funds to carry out those activities. So for that reason, we don't expect that you necessarily have a fully completed set of architectural and engineering, because you may need these resources to do that work and then to go out to bid. But we do expect that you'll be able to meet the funding expenditure deadline. So you would need to have a fully developed project and to have a plan for implementation of that project and a clear pathway to the implementation within the time frame, which is to start construction within 6 months. So I hope that provides an answer that both allows for the flexibility of those applicants that may not have the capital available to expend on the architectural engineering. That's also why we have the planning resources and the pre-development resources, looking to lower that barrier for accessibility. So you don't have to have all those pieces complete, but you do have to have a full plan for implementation and the ability to carry out and be successful at that plan. I hope that provided the clarity.
I think so. I'm just scrolling through. I know we have a number of questions. I think some of them were similar, but want to make sure that I'm getting to all of those. There is a comment that given the current state in the world, securing a contractor within 6 months does not seem feasible. We understand there's challenges, certainly at this time with those resources. And just GMS is our grants management system. There's a question about that as well. And I will say, if we did not get to your question, it's likely because it is best addressed in our upcoming application workshop or in a pre-application meeting that's very specific to your project as far as this webinar goes. There's a question about where we can find the complete definition of a community center. That will be forthcoming in our program guidance that we'll be sharing with you. But also to note, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar as well as the presentation slides in the coming weeks. So you will have access to that information should you want to review that information and share it with others in your community as you're considering whether or not this program may be a fit for you. And Katie, I know there's just a couple other questions about the timeline, about if we're able to secure a contract for a contractor, would that count? And when does the clock start on the 6-month construction deadline? I'm not sure if we have those specifics at this moment, but wanted to raise that.
Yeah, so we encourage everyone to work towards readiness by working with your community again to develop the plans for your community center, either the renovation of existing or the building of a new center. And then we'll work with you in those pre-application meetings to determine if this opportunity is aligned with the readiness of your project. So we really look to ensure that all projects can be successful. If you've put in the effort to build this community commitment to this project and really to develop a project over time, it will align to a funding resource. So that pre-application meeting would be the best time to really understand whether this opportunity and timeline, that 6-month timing, makes sense for your project. It would be from the time of award that we would expect the construction to start 6 months after the time of the funding award, which will be at the end of May.
Great, and just further clarification that pre-application meetings will take place closer to that March 23rd application webinar. So you will have instructions, and everyone who is looking to have that pre-app meeting with CDFA staff will have the opportunity to do so. There wasn't a question about whether regional childcare centers might be eligible here. Katie, do you want to maybe just speak to that versus a family resource center or multi-use building for that purpose?
Yeah, so Family Resource Center obviously meets the multifaceted needs of a community by providing often childcare as well as family strengthening programs. So that would likely meet the definition of community center and could apply for funds on its own as a family resource center to upgrade its facility. Great. It looks like we're winding down on the
questions and can likely wrap up a little bit early. You guys have had some really awesome questions, and we really appreciate that dialogue. And your willingness to work with us. We're really excited to see some great projects come through. Katie, would you like to close us out?
I'd love to. Thank you. I just want to thank the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits for being a partner for us in this work, co-hosting this webinar and ensuring that information got to you all. And thank you all for being a part of this webinar today and spending your snowy morning with us. I also, as Melissa noted, we do really take your feedback as we develop additional program guidance. So if there's feedback you have, and a good example can be that multi-use question, multi-site. So if you have a multi-site community center, is that eligible? We'd encourage people to provide us feedback on that in our feedback page, which is contact@nhcdfa.org. So if you have additional feedback for needs in your community and questions that you'd like answered, we really would love to hear from you at that contact@nhcdfa.org. So again, thank you to the center and to all of you and the staff of CDFA for helping to pull this webinar together, and we really look forward to continuing to work with you as you advance this important community center development in your community. So have a good day, and thanks for being a part of this.